And welcome everyone. We're so glad that you have joined us today. We are going to have an opportunity to virtually visit a school-based family resource center. And the Family Resource Center that we will be visiting is located in Hawaii and is part of the Waimanalo, hope I said that right, Kathleen, elementary and intermediate school in Hawaii. So we will be introducing Kathleen in just a few moments, but before we do, want to have an opportunity to share some general information with you about family resource centers. So you have the information before we start. And also want to mention before we dive in a couple of technical things. Your line has been muted to reduce background noise. And if you have any questions throughout our time together, we encourage you to use the chat. That will serve as a parking lot of sorts. So if you have questions, we are going to have a Q&A time period at the end of the time here for Kathleen. So put any questions that you have as you think of them in the chat box. And we also have Michael Zamora here with us on tech. So if you're having trouble accessing any of Zoom's features, just let Michael know. And he has tech conveniently at the first part of his name. So you can see that in the participant panel. So before we move any further, we would like to get a sense of how familiar you are with family resource centers. So we have a spectrum here ranging from not so familiar to very familiar. So take a moment to let us know. Can see these results coming in. Give you about 5 more seconds so we can hear from as many folks as possible. Okay. Well, it looks like we have the full spectrum represented. So those of you that are more familiar, some of this may be a review, and those of you that are less familiar, we'll get you all up to speed by the end of our time together. So thank you for being here with us. And one other question. This question is, have you ever visited a family resource center? And we all know that one family resource center looks like one family resource center. They're all so different, but curious how many of you have been to a family resource center in person? Okay, I'll give you a few more moments here to reply if you haven't just yet. All right. Very cool. Looks like an overwhelming majority of you have visited a family resource center. Wonderful. And for those of you that haven't, you'll get to see one virtually. And let's move along here. Okay, so talking about family resource centers, thousands of them have emerged organically across the country, and yet their existence is still largely under the radar, and we often call this America's best kept secret. So a family resource center is a community or school-based welcoming hub of support and services and opportunities that are designed to support families to be strong and to be successful. And so the top image that you see here on the left is from a community-based family resource center located in Vermont. And the bottom one is from a school-based family resource center that is located in Kentucky. And so family resource centers work with families with an approach that is not only 2-generational, but multi-generational, and is also strengths-based and family-centered. And each of these concepts is important. So let's talk about them for a moment. So with multi-generational, I'm sure many of you have heard of two-generational or two-gen work, but with family support being the original, it's the original, not just two-gen, but multi-generational work. So programs are working with children and parents and grandparents as well. And family resource centers are strengths-based. So we see families as having strengths that we want to support them to build upon. And family resource centers are family-centered because everything we do has families at the center. And FRCs are designed for all families. So not only low-income or highly challenged ones, but they are supporting and providing services that are non-stigmatized and make it more readily available and accessible to everyone. And so programming is provided at no cost or low cost for participants. And I have a question for you before I move to the next slide. How many of you have heard of the Protective Factors Framework? And I'll launch this poll. So the Strengthening Families Protective Factor Framework. How many of you are familiar with this? Okay, give you a few more moments if you haven't had a chance to respond just yet. Okay, whoops, sorry. All right, so it looks like many of you are familiar. Wonderful. I'll share a little bit of information now just to make sure we're all on the same page here. And so the Strengthening Families Protective Factor Framework comes from the Center for the Study of Social Policy. And research has shown that these 5 protective factors increase family stability, enhance child development, and reduce the likelihood of child abuse and neglect. So as we're working with families, we want to support them to build these protective factors because we know that they make a positive difference. And you can see at the bottom of the slide here where you can access the Center for the Study of Social Policy website to learn more about these 5 protective factors. And so I want to share a little bit more about family resource centers as a whole. So there is no dedicated federal funding for family resource centers, unlike Head Start, home visiting, after-school programs. Yet there are now more than 3,000 of them that are working with more than 2 million people annually. So pretty incredibly. And so why are so many public and private funders at the state and county, city, and community levels choosing to invest in family resource centers? And so they are just a good idea. They're cost effective and they are highly adaptable for various communities. So whether it's urban, rural, or ethnic, highly adaptable. And they have demonstrated successful outcomes through multiple external evaluations. And so as conveniently located hubs of support, family resource centers bundle and co-locate many services that may be familiar to you, such as home visiting, evidence-based parent education, health screenings, play groups, fatherhood programs, family counseling, and food banks. And so because family resource centers are by and for the communities that they serve, we often say if you've seen one family resource center, you've seen one family resource center. Yet at the same time, we know from research that has been conducted in 2015 and 2016 through the support of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that there is a remarkable similarity in their most common service areas. And so the first 2 are the bread and butter of any family resource center, but be it urban or rural, school-based or community-based. And these parenting supports exist on a continuum that you can see here. So starting with a lighter touch with these parenting workshops, and then becoming more intensive, offering more intensive services, parenting support groups, parent education series, and home visiting being the more intensive here. And then access to resources also exists on a continuum from lighter touch to more intensive services. So starting with enhanced information and referral, moving with concrete supports, and then working with families over time to address their goals. And then those co-location of resources. So these different supports are actually co-located. All right, and want to share just a little bit more here. So family resource centers not only provide programs, but they build communities of peer support for families to develop social connections that reduce isolation and stress, which are highly correlated with child abuse. And so with that, I am going to introduce to you Kathleen Odell. Very excited to have Kathleen here with us this morning. And she comes to us from Hawaii, and it is very early there. So let's give her a round of applause with a warm welcome and send her a virtual coffee.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thanks for being here, everybody. It is about 6:30 in the morning here, so if I stumble over a few words, please excuse me, but still happy to have this opportunity to share. So as she said, my name is Kathleen Odell, and I am what's called a complex academic officer here in Hawaii. And let me just explain that for a moment. Hawaii is actually one giant school district, the whole state. And so then it's broken into complexes. So a complex is what most of you on the continent know as a school district. Okay. And we are the newbies of this group, and that's why we're here this morning. We are just getting started with our family resource centers and our school-based family resource centers, and the newest members of the National Family Support Network. So thank you for welcoming us. Just a quick map of Hawaii here, just so you can kind of see where we are. We are on the island of Oahu, and you can see that that is in fact not the big island. The big island is down there at the bottom, but Oahu is the most populated island. And if you know Honolulu and you've been here, or you've heard about Waikiki, all of those things exist on Oahu. So we are on the windward side of Oahu. So if you can see on the right side there, that's the windward side would be the east coast basically of Oahu. And there's 14 schools in my school complex, and that ranges all the way from pre-K through 12, and very diverse. So it's very interesting because like one of our schools is actually on the Mokapu Marine Base. So it's almost completely Marine families. And then it goes all the way down to our last school, which is Pope Elementary down there you see on the map. And that actually sits on the Hawaiian homelands. So very, very diverse in ethnicity, in socioeconomic status, in many ways. 27% of the students in my complex do identify as Native Hawaiian, with the greatest populations being at our Pope Elementary and our Waimanalo Elementary and Intermediate schools in the southern part of the Windward District. 35% of our students in my complex are low socioeconomic status. Just another little interesting fact about Hawaii, about 25% of the students in Hawaii attend private schools. That's, I think, the second in the nation to perhaps DC. And we have about 12% in our complex students with special needs. So just going to tell you about how our journey got started for any of those of you who are out there who are thinking about getting this going. This is one way that we found to do it. It is a unique journey, I think, for everyone. But if we can in any way help by sharing our journey with you, then that will be a wonderful thing. So back way back when in March, April, May, that area of time when the pandemic was starting, and I had more opportunities to attend national conferences and webinars without having to travel 10 hours from Hawaii. I started listening to and researching about the work that the National Family Support Network was doing around family resources. And I attended one of those Uncovering America's Best Kept Secrets webinars. And then it just started from there. And I found that the work was so exciting to me because it was really what people here in Hawaii had been talking about in conversations over the past 4 years since I'd been here, really making those connections with communities and really helping families to hook up with resources and centralizing services on school campuses. So all of that sounded very exciting to me. I really thought, well, it would be great to be able to create that welcoming and accessible space for families. We have PCNCs at most of our schools, but not all. And those are parent community network centers, but they're not actually centers, they're people. I think initially, probably when they started that program, they were intending them to be centers, but there has been a lack of support district-wide, statewide for our PCNCs in recent years. And they only work about 17 to 19 hours a week. They're part-time. So that is a challenge. So thinking about how we can move that into actually having a welcoming and accessible space for families and really broadening what we're doing for our families. And then, you know, strengthening the protective factors is huge for us. There's been obviously an increase in stress and trauma for all of our families throughout COVID. That was something that we were already looking into as a complex, trauma-informed practices. So this was fitting in nicely with all the work that was already being started in that area. Wanted to connect families to community resources, and that was huge. Our schools saw more and more families coming in asking for those concrete support resources when COVID came around. The schools suddenly became, you know, so much more than schools. And if they had a trusting relationship with someone at the school, they were asking for things like, you know, I can't pay my rent, I don't have food, my family's suffering from COVID, we can't even leave the house. So many new problems they were bringing to our PCNCs and to our schools. And then we also really wanted to build opportunities for family leadership and decision making. And that's something that we've, you know, always struggled with and really wanted to improve. We acknowledge it's an area of growth for us, is getting that family voice and that family leadership into school decision making and planning. So I've been calling this riding the wave all year because things happen so very, very quickly for us, which has been wonderful. But we've also wanted to keep going and, like, you know, ride the wave and not let anything drop because of so much enthusiasm for the work that we've started. So attended those National Family Support Network webinars back in the summer. In August, I met with 3 of my interested PCNCs in my complex. I had been working with them since I came here 4 years ago. I started doing family engagement quarterly meetings with them. So I had a chance to establish relationships with them and get to know some of them really well. So that was super when they reached out and they were like, yes, it sounds like a great idea. They discussed it with their schools, with their principals, and we progressed from there. Then Andrew Russo and I, the director of Family Resource Centers, National Family Support Network, presented with me at the Ohana Engagement Conference in 2020. At the same time, I was in Andrew is so kind and so giving of his time and had spent lots of time talking to me and answering my many, many questions. Over the years, he had met multiple people from Hawaii at various conferences on the continent, and they had spoke to him about their interest in family resource centers many times. So he had actually compiled, bless his heart, kept a whole list of all the people he had talked to over the years from the different organizations here. So we reached out to them. We let them know we were presenting. We also let them know that we were going to have a statewide training on the quality of standards through National Family Support Network. And so some of them were so excited to attend the conference and to sign up for the training. And we got 36 people enrolled in the training right away, which was amazing. So amazing, then so much enthusiasm for that we ended up having a second training just like 6 weeks later and had another like 40 people. So within just a couple months time, we had like 75 people in Hawaii trained on those standards, which was so fantastic because we really wanted to have a shared understanding of what quality would look like and what the consistency would be amongst our family resource centers, even though we know each one was going to be so unique. So just right around the corner then in October, we brought those people from the different organizations and Department of Health, Department of Human Services, multiple nonprofit organizations that exist here in Hawaii who were interested came together, and we formed a state steering committee. And that was like the first time that many had had a chance to work cross-organizationally like that and with various departments, state departments. So that was the committee that came together to start to plan for our future. We joined then in December with Neighborhood Places, a nonprofit organization that exists here in Hawaii and has existed for years, that has been doing a lot of work of family resource centers, and we're interested in joining in that shared understanding and consistency of practice. And by coupling with them then, the schools that I had in my complex and Neighborhood Places, we qualified to join the National Family Support Network, and did then. So you can see how quickly all of that occurred. So making those connections was so very, very important to us. We couldn't have done this work I believe, if it wasn't cross-organizational. And from the very beginning, we've had the conversation around within our organizations and within the state departments, our positions often change and things get shifted around. But if we build this work with multiple organizations, then we can build capacity. Losing one person wouldn't mean we would lose our network or lose the support for our family resource centers. So this is a bit about Neighborhood Places. They are run through Blueprint for Change, which actually comes from a grant through our Department of Health. And this is their vision and mission, which, as you can see, is very close to family resource centers. So it was a wonderful natural partnership with them. And they are community-based family resource centers. So as a network, we really decided these were the things that we really wanted to work on this year. We wanted to grow, so we did survey. We have a survey that we can send out to anybody we think is doing the work of family resource centers in order to find more who want to join in the network and want the support and want the consistency. And at the same time, we've been presenting quite a lot to try and get that word out in case anybody is interested in starting family resource centers, including not only in my complex, but other complexes across the state and also in communities. We wanted to know, so we wanted to really assess the needs of our family resource centers to make sure that we weren't just meeting and talking, but also concretely providing supports. And we've been able to do that by inviting our PCNCs that run our FRCs in my complex to our monthly meetings and taking turns having our organizations present to them about what they do and what they might offer, and then hearing from our PCNCs about what their needs are. And they worked this year on filling out the self-assessment piece after the training to get some baseline data around the standards of quality family engagement, about what their needs are and what their priorities are for next year. And so we've been able to make those connections to see how we can help them and share those resources. And then strengthening, we really want to expand the training opportunities. It's so wonderful that we got 75 trained already. We want to do more of that. And we are actually in June, just a couple weeks away, 8 of us from the Ohana Support Network will be trained to be trainers so that we can offer that standards training in-house here in Hawaii. Okay, so who starts an FRC in a pandemic? I couldn't have done it without those PCNCs, I have to say, and I know some of them are on the meeting today, and just A huge mahalo to you and for all of your work that you've been doing with us and for your schools and for your families. So we really talked about with our PCNCs from the beginning. We know that we're in a pandemic, so we're not expecting some great miracle. We're going to dream big and really think about, where we want it to go eventually, but we can start small, and that's okay. We're going to start with what we can do. What was super important to us, though, is that we started with the family's voice from the beginning. We don't want to make assumptions about what families need. We also want to make sure that we're including their funds of knowledge and their talents, their skills. So we started by, having them talk to the families to see what they needed and what resources they could use and what they might be willing to share within a family resource center. And then surveying our families as well. This was a big year for surveying, of course, because we weren't able to physically welcome folks onto the campus this year. So either we were getting information through the grab and go lunch lines or from those surveys or perhaps from phone calls, right? We also want to make sure that we were partnering with our administration. And I know at least one of our principals, Waimanalo's principals on today, welcome. And I'm not sure others may have joined since I looked. It's important because each administrator has a different vision for their school, and you have to make sure that you're partnering with them and that you're all on the same page. It won't work in a school-based FRC unless the administrator is part of your team. And then this year was really just a year for planning and building that foundation, a strong foundation, so we don't go too fast, and we build that capacity and we build that strength from the get-go. Gathering our resources, and that's what our Ohana Support Network has been assisting us with. And then really focusing on relationships, because at the heart of the work the Family Resources does is relationships. It's the relationships with the families. It's the relationships of your Family Resource Center staff and administration. It's the relationships we're creating with our statewide network and the resources provided. And Hawaii understands relationships a lot because that is a huge part of the culture here. Whenever we want to get anything done, it helps if we have those trusting relationships established. So that's a concept we really get here. So now I'm gonna introduce our PCNCs, and I have a little extra time this morning, so I'm going to introduce you to the three that started all of this, and then we'll highlight Waimanalo a bit. So this is Kailua High School, and this is our fabulous Diana Baldwin, and she I know is on the meeting today. Thank you to Diana. Kailua High School is the Surf Riders, and Diana has been there for many years and has been so devoted and was the first to want to know more about family resource centers and has always been super eager to improve her own practice. She is never one to just let things remain the same. She's always looking for better ways to do things. And she's already done a great job of getting multiple parents on their school community council, which is sometimes unusual here. That's the monthly meetings that we have at our schools that you need to have at least one family member attend. In the case of Kailua High School, there are multiple, and she herself attends all of those meetings and has been able to, through the support of her principal, to share the Family Resource Center data and the survey data that she's been collecting and the self-assessment data with them to involve them through that venue in the decision-making and the planning. This is Susie Mitchell, and she's at Kailua Elementary School. Susie is a former teacher. So what's so nice about that is a lot of her work, and she just started a couple years ago, but what a bright light. She's been able to really bring the teacher's experience and voice into family engagement as well, and has really led a cause to partner with teachers to involve them in engaging families and giving them those strategies and skills as well. So that's been amazing. And then this is Waimanalo Elementary School. And on the left, you will see Fuli and her daughter, who is taller than she is. Fuli Soa is very strong part of the community in Waimanalo, which has made a huge difference there because Waimanalo is a school that is very much rooted in the community and the culture of the community. There's a stronger EL population, English language learners there, and many from the islands of Micronesia. Fuli works with a team at her school. And on the right, you see Carlene, who is the EL coordinator. And that's wonderful. She's on the left of the right picture. Wonderful to have her working on the team because of the stronger EL population there and making sure that we are understanding their needs and their barriers and providing extra resources for them within the Family Resource Center and making sure that their voice is also strong in the decision-making and the planning. You know, the big part of family engagement is making sure that all voices are represented, and that especially so for those populations that are at higher risk. Those are really the ones that we want to plan for and reach first, because that's where we can make the most difference as far as student success goes with our school-based family resource centers. And then on the right of that picture is Donna, and Donna is actually our preschool teacher there, formerly our kindergarten teacher there. And she's been wonderful on the team because she's brought the early childhood perspective. We were trying to plan like what we wanted the Family Resource Center to look like there. And she said, wait, we need to make sure to have an area for younger children and make sure that we're including programming for younger children so that we're meeting the needs of the whole family. So love having that perspective and that reminder from Donna. All right, so because we have not been able to welcome families onto our campus physically, and Hawaii has been quite strict throughout this, we're still under a mask mandate, and we didn't start welcoming students back broadly until this past March. So we have had to do a lot of what we're doing virtually, not only all of our meetings, but also all the online teaching with the students. And then we had to figure out ways to meet the needs of our families virtually. And really, Susie Mitchell posed this question the beginning of last summer when we started the pandemic. How do we create relationships virtually? If we haven't already established relationships, especially with new parents, how do you create relationships virtually? So that was something that was always in my head whenever we were thinking about this work. So here's what it looks like. We started with building virtual family resource centers. So these are Google site websites, which have been quite easy to navigate and easy to share in building. If you haven't tried these already, I'm a big fan of them myself. So this is Kailua Elementary's virtual family resource center. And they've been able to do some wonderful things. Because I have a bit of extra time, I'm going to share a few of these things with you. They did a Grandparents' Day virtually. Tutu is the Hawaiian word for grandma. And so that school, Kailua Elementary, is interesting because it has not only a local population, but also a transplant population because some of the families from our Marine base also attend there. So there are grandparents all over the place, not just the ones that couldn't come because of COVID, but those who couldn't come because they're 10 hours away in some cases, right? So they did a virtual Grandparents' Day with a theme of pirates. So you'll see here some grandparents dressed up as pirates, and that is the virtual Zoom Grandparents' Day that they did. Susie Mitchell in the upper left-hand corner there of that picture, and 2 over is their principal participating also. And they had so much fun, and the grandparents were so very appreciative of this. And you can see in some of those pictures, the kids are with some of their grandparents. In Hawaii, we do very much have families that live multi-generational here. So it's quite common to have grandparents, cousins, everybody living in the same household because the cost of living is so very expensive here. And because amongst many of our cultures, culturally, they believe in multi-generational living as well. They did a literacy luau online and a virtual math night. So you can see they had sent home kits that you could get in the grab and go when you picked up your lunch to use for this virtual family math night. And then on the right is the principal participating there from her office as well. Thank you to Allison Doherty, our principal there. Okay, Kailua High School, this is their website. You see Diana Baldwin there. They have done an amazing job of both they and Kailua L, adapting something that we did in our complex first. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we surveyed over 200 of our families responded on our complex about what was the most challenging aspects of parenting during a pandemic. This is the results that we got. So they were talking about in this survey, all of the additional challenges they had as a result of COVID and the needs for resources and for information that they now had. These were the topics of interest to the families, you can see. So from this list, I paired up with the Hawaii Statewide Family Engagement Center, who has been a wonderful partner in all of our work throughout. They are attached to the University of Hawaii and had access to many local experts around these areas the families had identified. And so we were able to then create webinars every 2 weeks throughout the summer based on the needs that the families identified. And we did do Zoom webinars with them. And we recorded them as well and housed them on our website, because 68% of the families we surveyed had said that they would prefer that they're recorded because they weren't sure they would be able to attend live. Either that's because of working schedules or having young children to care for. So we wanted to make sure that they were the most accessible as possible. So Kailua High School and Kailua Elementary School actually scaled this down. We talked about, that was wonderful because it was for the whole complex and we could meet the needs of many of our families in the complex. But we wanted to create parent support groups at the school-based level because we wanted to meet the specific needs of those school communities and also give opportunities for our families to meet each other and talk to each other and create those relationships through their struggles and understanding we're all kind of in the same boat. Really an opportunity to virtually create social capital for them, which was something that was really missing. Like especially at Kailua High School, Diana was concerned with the incoming freshmen parents who had never even had a chance to meet each other physically. So we worked with our school psychologists, and they had a couple of interns this year who helped us out. They surveyed their schools individually, and then based on those surveys and what the families indicated they were interested in, their needs, those school psychologist interns then designed 8-week sessions with each of the schools separately for virtual family support groups for those school-based communities. And then they did record them and made the recordings available on those websites that I shared with you, so that those who couldn't attend could then view the recording based on the topic of their interest. And this is our Waimanalo Family Resource Center. Now, I will say that this has been such a nice way to connect resources in a way that is focused on families. A lot of times our school websites might have a small piece for families, but this is one that is completely dedicated to all of these different areas. And you'll see here on the pull down, these were all areas of interest to the families there. These were areas that they're coming to our PCNCs, our Family Resource Center staff, and they were having issues around these areas. So they each have their own page with resources that we've been able to work with our network to connect. And we've done our best to find the most direct way to connect with those resources. Because a lot of times if you just give them a website or a phone number, they won't have established that relationship with that organization. They might not feel comfortable reaching out to them. So knowing that Fuli and her team have worked with a network and they've made these connections, and they've in many chances gotten to virtually at least meet the people from these organizations, they can tell them that, you know, I've already spoken with them. This is what they can offer. This is the number that you call. This is who you could talk to. So all of this is now existing on their website. So Waimanalo is actually the first of the 3 to have a physical place to be. This has been a really big challenge for us this year in building family resource centers. It was like, how do we build one if we don't have a space yet? My other 2 schools, Kailua L and Kailua High School, faced a challenge because, again, very strict about the social distancing in Hawaii. So we've been trying very hard, even when we brought students back, to keep them 6 feet apart in our classrooms. Because of that, we've had to spread out all throughout the campuses and take and use every available space. So like Susie Mitchell might be pushing her office around on a cart basically at this point because her space is needed for students, right? To make sure that we are keeping them safe. So they have not had dedicated physical space yet in those two schools for their family resource centers. They are working on that for next year, and they are working on their plan for that. Now, Waimanalo did have a dedicated space this year, and they also got a grant for a transition center grant run through our state, and was able to purchase the laptops and the smart board that you see on the left. That is going to help our families who have a lot of challenges around filling out our free and reduced lunch forms, identifying as MVA or homeless, the forms they need to fill out. Now we hope to have people in the family resource centers and these devices available so they can come in there and get that assistance to get those things done. Or if they need to find resources on the internet, those will be available to them. And then of course, also when in the future they have face-to-face meetings, they could come back face-to-face and still have families that prefer to be on Zoom. So it'll be like we're teaching concurrently. We might have meetings concurrently this next year. So we might be able to broadcast those who are still at home on that screen. So wonderful asset to their center. And you can see there on the right 2 pictures of their schools, which you can see such a beautiful backdrop there in Waimanalo. They did a fabulous project I wanted to share with you. This was Fuli's idea to have a culture day. And this culture day was actually something they had to do completely virtually. And she had to keep in mind how she was going to do that with still social distancing and making sure to keep everyone safe. So this was multi-generational, and she invited her families, not just the children, but the parents and the grandparents, to share about their cultures. And Waimanalo is so blessed to have so many different cultures there. So these are just screenshots of the video that she made of Culture Day. And I believe she even got her son involved in helping to make the video. It was truly a family project. So they had students from Tonga, Samoa, the islands of Micronesia. You see here the grandma from one of the islands of Micronesia and her grandkids. They sang a song. And here about the Hawaiian culture, this grandma and her grandson are there teaching a traditional Hawaiian game. And so all of these were put on the video and then made available to the rest of the family so that everybody could view it. But clearly she had to film every one of these separately to make sure that everybody was socially distanced. This was a labor of love, but what a wonderful one it was. And I know how very much it was appreciated by all of the families. They've also done a lot at Waimanalo with Grab and Go. They've been one of our feeding sites all along, feeding the community. And then when we went back to having students, they're still feeding our distance learners as well in the Grab and Go. So at drop off and at Grab and Go, they are catching their families with short surveys that literally they hand them and say, if you fill this out, I'll give you donut and coffee. What a wonderful idea, right? And so they can quickly get that information in the line. Waimanalo's community is one that often prefers paper versus doing something online. So they're very mindful of being sure to have multiple means of communications with the families there and offering not only the links and the surveys online, but also the paper surveys to gather the information from as many people as possible. And this you can see is them getting ready for their coffee and donut line. So really, I just want to say that school-based family resource centers require layers of support. So in the middle, I put families and FRCs because I believe that is one entity, that the families should be an integral part of the Family Resource Center at the core. But then we also have our PCNCs who then support our family resource centers and the families. We have our Ohana Support Network, which is our statewide support. And then we have our complex level support. And again, a complex is like a school district on the continent. And how did we support through the complex? So we supported through an equity committee that we formed in my complex. And what does that mean? So I saw that a lot of different people within our complex were working with families, but everybody was kind of working in silos. So I brought these folks together so we could have one conversation at the table. And we started a couple years ago to support family engagement. And this has followed through to now supporting our family resource centers. So we have our inclusive practices resource teacher, our complex resource teacher, our ELL resource teacher, our Title I complex coordinator. We had someone from our State Office of Hawaiian Education, our complex homeless concerns liaison, and some of our complex social workers joined together on this committee to talk about their work around family engagement individually and how we might work together. For example, in the schools, our Title I schools must do a certain number of family engagement that involve an academic component that is mandatory for the funding. Our ELL school-based resource teachers have to do at least 2 family engagement functions per year, but a lot of times they are doing it separately. The PTA, which we call PTSA here, might be doing something separately. The PCNC might be doing something separately. So how can we model coming together and doing that work together and showing how it complements the work that we're doing complements each other, and how by working together we can maximize the effect and really get specifically those marginalized populations that these folks represent engaged with our schools, and making sure that we're hearing their voice and being there for them and helping them to become leaders and being part of the decision making. So when we started our family resource centers, we made sure that everyone from this equity committee reached out to our PCNCs at our family resource centers to speak specifically to them about the needs of that group they represented, and to provide the resources that they have available to the family resource centers so they understood how to access those resources as well. So that's been our complex level layer of support. So just to summarize what they have done this year at our virtual family resource centers, starting out by surveying those families and talking to families, that's got to be what you begin with. You want to make sure that you are always planning with. You want to go for that power with rather than power over when it comes to any school and family relationship. You want to really look at their funds of knowledge from an asset-based perspective. And we know that everyone has something that they can teach and something that they can share. So how can we value that and empower them to want to share that with other families and with our students? And then, that willingness to advise and lead, finding those who want to have a part in the schools, decision-making and planning and events and engagement. A lot of times that means that you have to take a look at what you're offering. If you've been offering the same things at a school for the past 10 years, and then you wonder why you're not getting as many volunteers and people engaged, then we really need to take a look at what it is that we're offering. Is there enough opportunities that value the funds of knowledge, the skills, and the talents that our families have available to interest them in becoming engaged with the school? Then taking action. We built those school-based FRC Google sites. We were gathering our resources with our equity committee and our Ohana network. Planning for 21-22. We have lots of plans for next year, utilizing those grab and go drive-throughs as a way to communicate. Then in November, of course, we started those family support groups based on the needs identified from families. It was that opportunity to build social capital, working with our district school psychologists, a wonderful partnership. And then in May, our schools, our family resource centers did that self-assessment that comes along with the standards of quality training, and got that baseline data. And from that data, talked to their principals and decided on their priority focuses for next year. And then they brought that to our Ohana support network and let us all know what their priorities would be for next year, so that we could all try to focus our resources around what they're identifying as their priority focuses. And so now we have that data from our schools, which is so valuable. And having those collaborative conversations with them, letting them have the opportunity to speak directly to the organizations, has been so very important to creating those relationships and allowing the resources to be accessible to our family resource centers and as many families as possible. All right, so what we're celebrating is we're so very proud to be the new members of the National Family Support Network. We're super excited that we are going to do the Train the Trainer in June. We also are a part of the National Governors Association's learning cohort. That started with several of the organizations that are on the Ohana Support Network, like our Department of Health and Department of Human Services. They asked me to join in at the first learning cohort because nationally they were talking about family resource centers, and lo and behold, Andrew Russo was there speaking to the groups. And so I was happy to share what we were doing in Hawaii. And then we got invited to join the second learning cohort. And we have also been awarded the technical assistance through the National Governors Association, which is super wonderful. And Andrew and I will actually be presenting to that group later in the morning or afternoon for Andrew. And there's really so many opportunities for spreading the word. We're so excited that we've been asked to present so many places and so many people are interested. The more we can get the word out, the more that we can grow our network here in Hawaii, and the stronger we can become as a state within this work. So thank you for the opportunities and the opportunity that we have today to present to you all and to get the word out there. A huge mahalo to everyone. And now I'm hoping some of you have some questions, and I would happily entertain any that are in the chat room. And I think Julie's going to help me moderate that.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Kathleen. Such a wonderful presentation. And I see everyone here is echoing that in the chat window here. So we'll ask everyone.
Put my slide deck right there in the chat for you all, so you have that.
And thanks, Kathleen. And we will also have the recording of this as well as the full slide deck available on the NFSN website shortly as well, so you can share it with other stakeholders too. So we'll use the way we'll do question and answer is just putting any questions that you have for Kathleen into the chat box, and we have about 5 minutes to go through some questions. Feel free to jump right in.
I did see a question about the viewing the recordings. That has been one thing, a learning curve for us this year. So, right. We were like, how do we know how many people have actually watched the recording? So somebody is suggesting you can see the statistics on Google Sites. I didn't even know that. I'm going to have to check it out. We have been talking about, Susie and Diana and I have been talking about, perhaps utilizing like a YouTube channel, because then you can actually, or Vimeo, then you can actually like record how many people are watching. So that was something we learned this year for sure, because we would like to have that data. So far, it's just been data of people who've been telling Diana and Susie that they watched the recording, and thank you for recording it.
Kathleen, I have a question from Amy. Do you provide any special support for families with special needs or with the IEP process?
So when we did our the Parenting During the Pandemic webinar series, we actually did have one that was specifically focused on that. We have a wonderful colleague at the Hawaii Statewide Family Engagement Center who specializes in that and was able to provide it. And the families loved it so much, they asked for more of it. That is our Inclusive Practices RT works with our family resource centers to make sure that they know about the supports that are available. We're also looking at working with various other organizations. I attend a monthly meeting that is supported by the Department of Education here, the Community Council, which brings together all organizations around servicing children with special needs. So we are hoping that they will also help us provide some programming going forth. But we acknowledge that we need to make sure that we are engaging those families and have their voice. And that's something that we talk about in family engagement generally here, is anything that you're planning, how accessible and welcoming is it to families with children with special needs? Respite care is very difficult for families to get. They may not feel comfortable bringing their child if there's not someone qualified there to handle the child care. There's all kinds of barriers that we need to work with, not around, but with. So I think that staying in close connection, I guess I would say staying in close connection with our Inclusive Practices RT and understanding the needs and the resources within our complex, and then also making those connections with the community organizations and the nonprofits that provide supports are so important.
Thank you, Kathleen. And there's a question from Angie about your funding streams.
So it's been a lot of sweat equity this year. I'm not going to kid you. and I see Principal Richardson smiling at this, right? Not a lot of funding resources in the Department of Education necessarily, especially this year when everything was on, everything was frozen because we had no idea what was going to happen with so many things, the election, the pandemic, all of those things. So our PCNCs are funded by these schools. Like I said, not all schools are required to have them, but these schools have chosen to have them because they value family engagement. But they only work 17 to 19 hours a week. So that's a huge barrier to this work. So Waimanalo, like I said, has their team, right? But going forth, we are certainly hoping to expand Family Resource Centers teams. And a lot of that is going to come through grant writing. And we are looking into some federal grants right now, and also a state grant that we're writing for to help fund some of this. And I would just have to say, outside of that, when you're just getting started and before funding, if it weren't during a pandemic, we would have asked for parents to actually help in the Family Resource Centers. And that's the COVID has been a barrier to that for sure. There are families who we've been able to reach out to. I know Diana Baldwin's doing a fabulous job constantly asking families if they want to be part of a family advisory board. And that's the work that we hope to do next year, is to start that work and to be able to have families actually helping to staff the Family Resource Centers. So yeah, that's COVID, gosh darn it. But that's another one of those sweat equity pieces, right? That you can probably utilize if you develop those relationships without a cost to your schools. Yeah, no dedicated funding for Family Resource Centers, right? Julie mentioned, yes.
Not yet.
Grants out there right now. There's been more money released, and I have several meetings this week to plan about that and to work on that. So I am excited for the possibilities.
Yes, for sure.
And yes, CCAP money. Yes, I have a meeting about that on Friday, actually, yes, to talk about that very thing.
Yes, we've been joking with some of the national attention that it's becoming a little bit less of a secret lately, which is lovely. We have time for one last question. And Michael asks, are the Family Resource Centers managed by the schools or through the your support network? And just about the structure and layers, as much as you can share in approximately 60 seconds, no pressure.
Right now through the schools, but we're hoping because the Ohana Support Network is cross-organizational, we would like to see more cross-organizational management of our Family Resource Centers as well, especially given the limited amount of time that our PCNCs have. So that is definitely something that we're looking into. The school level funding changes year to year. And if we're going to build capacity, then we really want to look at what kind of relationships we can have with other organizations and other state departments that could support the funding and management of school-based Family Resource Centers as well. So again, I would reiterate how super important that is to work cross-organizationally, so it doesn't depend just on the school. That's a lot to just put on a school.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Kathleen, for presenting such a wonderful and informative presentation. And so with the school-based Family Resource Center tour coming to a close, Michael is going to put a link into the chat, and there it is with the evaluation. So it's very helpful if everyone could click on that SurveyMonkey link and fill out the evaluation. And for those of you that are staying for the national briefing that starts in just 30 short minutes, we're going to close this room for 15 minutes so we can put you in the waiting room if that's easiest. but we will reopen the room for some slides and music at 1:45 Eastern. So be sure to click on that evaluation, and we'll see everyone back in 15 minutes. And I see a question about the recording. And yes, the recording will be made available. It will be on the National Family Support Network website, either later today or tomorrow. And let's see. Okay, there we go. Thank you so much. Hopefully everybody can see the evaluation now. Okay. All right. Well, we'll give you a few moments to get the evaluation link opened, as that's so important and so helpful to us at the National Network. And before we go, let's give Kathleen another warm round of applause. Thank you so much for presenting today.
Thank you for having me.